Hello everyone, my name is Jasmine Sky and I am here today with my promised most anticipated YA releases of next year, 2022. I released my most anticipated middle grade releases video last Tuesday, so I will link that up here, whichever side it is, if you want to go watch that first. I had 12 most anticipated middle grade releases of 2022. I have 32 most anticipated YA releases, because YA is my primary genre at the moment, and there's a lot of talent coming out next year, and I'm really excited. A lot of this are debuts. Some of it is not debuts. Some of them are sophomore novels or just new series by authors that I enjoy, or some of them actually are new series by authors who I have had their debut series on my list but actually haven't read them yet, but the new series sound even more up my alley, so like there's just a scattering of things. Oh, and there's also some sequels to some books that I really liked last year, which is going to be a little bit of a spoiler because my favorite reads of 2021 video doesn't come out till Friday. So, oops, you get a little bit of a preview. We're scooting over this way. I am at my mom's house for the Christmas holiday season. I'm actually going to be here for 3 weeks. I'm also going to be working from her place for the beginning of the new year. That's where I am. This is her front door. And I am going to be filming the next however many videos right here from my mom's place. So that's what's going on. No fancy bookshelf in the back, sorry about that. Anyway, here is my graphic for the first half of the year of my most anticipated YA releases, and we're gonna go through them one by one and give just a very quick summary of the book, and then we'll move on to the second half of the year. We're gonna start with the first to release this new year, at least of my most anticipated first to release, and then go through to these ones that don't quite have a release date yet towards the end with the second half of the year. So let's get right into it. Number 1, we have Echoes and Empires by Morgan Rhodes. This is coming out on January 4th, and it's the first of Morgan Rhodes' new fantasy duology. It's set in a world where magic is forbidden, and it follows a girl who is cursed with dangerous magic who has to team up with a charismatic thief to cure herself. I have not actually read Morgan Rhodes' debut series yet, which I believe starts with Fallen Kingdom, but this one sounds, I think, even more up my alley, so I'm gonna give it a try, hopefully at some point in 2022. And then next on the list, I'm very excited for Leslie Vedder's The Bone Spindle. This one is a gender-bent retelling of Sleeping Beauty about a bookish treasure hunter and a huntswoman who team up to rescue a prince under a sleeping curse. This is a dual POV, so it follows the bookish treasure hunter who falls for the sleeping prince, and it also follows the lesbian huntswoman who falls for a mysterious witch. So that's very exciting. This one comes out on January 11th. Next on the list, we have Cold the Night, Fast the Wolves by Meg Long. This one also comes out on January 11th, and this is a debut science fiction novel about a girl and a feral fighting wolf who has to compete in their planet's infamous sled race to escape a gang. So, Ice Planet, fighting wolf companion, sled race, like, oh. And then next on the list, we have Icebreaker. This is one of the few contemporary books on my list. It follows 2 college hockey teammates who are competing for the NHL's top draft spot, and they end up falling in love. Hockey romance I have been waiting for since I was in college. And then we will jump ahead to February 1st. We have Castle in Their Bones by Laura Sebastian. This is the first of a fantasy trilogy about triplet princesses who are raised to seduce the princes of their neighboring kingdoms in order for their Empress mother to be able to kind of gain control of the entire continent. And it's a triple POV from what I understand. I am super excited by this idea, even more so than Laura Sebastian's debut series, which was Ash Princess. So I think this will be really good and very political. I love a good political fantasy. So And then next on the list, we have Fire Becomes Her by Rosie Thor. Rosie is someone I got to know during last year's author mentor match, and I am super excited for Rosie's sophomore novel. This comes out on February 3rd, and it's a fantasy set during the Jazz Age, but in a world where magic buys votes. As I just said, I love political fantasy, but this is a sort of more modern political fantasy, or at least uses more of a modern democratic presidential race setup, but with magic involved, and that just sounds amazing. I am very excited for Rosie's sophomore novel. Next on the list is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. Every year a girl is thrown into the sea because they're trying to find the sea god's true bride to get him to calm down and stop ravaging their land with storms. However, this year our main character throws herself into the sea to save her brother because her brother's fiance was the one that was going to be thrown into the sea. So our main character throws herself in voluntarily, and then she ends up in the spirit realm, and she has to figure out how to wake the sea god before she dies permanently. It sounds beautiful, and I'm really excited for it. This one and Fire Becomes Her, actually, I've already pre-ordered, and I'm excited to read them hopefully in February. And Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea comes out on February 22nd. And then next on the list we have Edgewood by Kristen Ciccarelli. This comes out on March 1st, and it is a fantasy following a girl who enters a magical forest to save her grandfather and strikes a deal with the Wood King, only to end up in the middle of a curse much bigger than herself. So love a good magical forest story, and the cover on Edgewood is just gorgeous. Another one that I already have pre-ordered is Blood Scion by Deborah Fellay. This is a debut following a young descendant of Orisha gods who can incinerate her enemies at will, and then she's conscripted into the army of this tyrannical empire and has plans to destroy them from within. I love a military fantasy. This sounds amazing. Coming out on March 8th is another YA military fantasy. This one, however, is a graphic novel. This one is Squire by Safa, Alef and Nadia Shamas. This one is about a Middle Eastern inspired empire, and it follows a girl training to become a knight in order to achieve full citizenship within the empire. And then another one coming out on March 8th that I am very excited for is One for All by Lily Lanoff. This is a Three Musketeers gender bent retelling following a girl with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and the author has that herself, so it's an own voices story about this girl who ends up going to this finishing school only to discover that it is secretly a training ground for lady musketeers. And then coming out on March 22nd is A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin. This is a fantasy about a girl with talent for brewing poison tea who ends up competing in the kingdom's competition to find the next great magical tea maker. And the sequel is actually also coming out later this year. I didn't include it on my list because I'm gonna have to read the first one to see if I want the sequel, but a fantasy duology where you get both books in the same year, what's not to love about that, right? And also this cover, y'all, it's gorgeous. I love it so much. And then the next on the list is So This Is Ever After by F.T. Luckins. This is my first F.T. Luckins or F.T. Luckins book, but I know that there is quite a number of these kind of fantasy romances, YA fantasy romances. They're all standalones from what I understand. This one follows a chosen one who, after he completed the prophecy, now our chosen one main character must choose a spouse to rule the kingdom with him, and so he starts trying to woo all of his quest companions, and each attempt seems to go horribly wrong. This one comes out on March 29th. Then the next on the list is Ballad and Dagger by Daniel Jose Older. The Rick Riordan Presents imprint, which has a bunch of authors doing contemporary fantasy retellings or mashups with their specific cultural mythologies. And this is the first of the YA side of that imprint. They used to just do middle grade, and now they're opening up to YA, and Daniel Jose Older was chosen to be the debut YA author of this side of the imprint, which is really exciting. And this one is about a boy whose island homeland disappeared into the sea, leaving the survivors to escape to New York City. It features pirates and magic, and it just sounds really exciting. And it comes out on May 3rd. Then we have Not Good for Maidens by Tory Beauvolino, also coming out on May 3rd. This one follows a girl whose teenage aunt disappears to the goblin market, and she has 3 days to rescue her aunt and deal with all of the twisted temptations of the goblin market. I think Tory Beauvolino writes mostly YA horror, so I'm hoping that this one is more on the side of dark fantasy and not true horror, because I don't do well with horror. So we'll see. I might wait for some of the early reviews to come out on that one before I pick up Not Good for Maidens. And then coming out on May 31st is Out of the Blue by Jason June. This is Jason's sophomore novel. It is a YA contemporary fantasy about a non-binary mermaid who agrees to fake date a human lifeguard in order to make the human's ex jealous. I love fake dating, non-binary main character, and a contemporary fantasy with mermaids. What more could you want? I am so excited about Out of the Blue. So those were all of my most anticipated for the first half of the year, though technically it only goes through the end of May, because I had more anticipated releases for the beginning of the year, if you include June, and slightly less for the end of the year, but that's okay. We'll get there with the next graphic. Here you go. And we'll start with the first June release, which comes out on June 7th. This is We All Fall Down by Rose Szabo. This is Rose's sophomore novel. It's a dark fantasy about a city ruled by a corrupt university where 4 queer teens must dodge ruthless cops, mad scientists, and get dragged into a magical conspiracy. So that sounds really interesting, kind of Night Vale-ish, which is exciting. And then another June 7th release is Wrath Goddess Sing by Maya Dean. This one is an Own Voices trans retelling of Achilles, who must stop the ruthless Helen and the corrupt Olympian gods before they drown the world in human sacrifice. Next on the list, we have a webtoon graphic novel that is getting its physical release on, wait for it, June 7th. And this is Crumbs by Danny Sterling. It's about a seer who discovers her first love in a barista of a magical bakery. So it sounds very sweet, and I am excited for another fun sapphic contemporary fantasy. And then we have another Greek retelling, which comes out on June 7th. This one is Game of Strength and Storm by Rachel Menard. This is a gender-bent sapphic retelling of Hercules. And then I get a bit of a break in terms of YA releases until July 26th, which is, but this release on July 26th is possibly my #1 most anticipated YA release of the entire year, and that is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn, the much anticipated sequel to Legendborn, which was my favorite book of last year. Spoilers for my next video. I adored Legendborn, and I cannot wait to read Bloodmarked. If you have not read Legendborn yet, it is a contemporary fantasy following a girl with mysterious powers who has to infiltrate this secret society at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, in order to investigate the death of her mother, and she faces the descendants of King Arthur and his knights, and it's just wonderful. And you should read it because it's amazing. And then another July 26th release is Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. This is a debut fantasy that follows a morally gray prophet who influences the royal court with not always true divinations until the prince announces his plan to strip her of her official role once he's crowned at the end of the summer. Next, we have a debut science fiction novel about a college girl who realizes that her nerdy boyfriend is secretly a superhero. That's How to Date a Superhero and Not Die Trying by Christina Fernandez. That one comes out on August 2nd. I love a fun superhero romance, so I think that one's gonna be just a lot of fun. And then another sequel that I'm very excited about from a book that I really enjoyed last year. This is Blood Like Fate by AuthorTube's own Lizelle Sambury. I really enjoyed Blood Like Magic last year. It's a science fiction, like a near future science fiction / urban fantasy story following a witch living in Toronto who has to destroy her first love or her whole family will lose their magic. So it was really good. If you have not read Lizelle's debut yet, I would definitely recommend it if you like dark fantasy. And the sequel of the duology, the final book in the duology, Blood Like Fate, comes out on August 9th. And then next up we have the first book of Aidan Thomas's new series. That's the Sunbearer Trials. This one comes out on September 6th and it follows demigods or semi-dioses who must compete in the Sunbearer Trials. The winner of the trials is sacrificed to the sun god Sol. The main character is the trans son of Quetzal, the goddess of birds, and he worries that his more powerful friends will compete in the trials and win and therefore die, only to end up being selected to compete in the trials himself. And then coming out also on September 6th is My Agent Siblings YA debut. This is Night of the Raven, Dawn of the Dove by Rati Marotta. This is a fantasy set in a medieval India that's infested with monsters, and it follows a young guardswoman who ends up in the center of a deadly game between two kingdoms. So that sounds very exciting. Next on the list is The One That Got Away by Sophie Gonzalez. This is the other YA contemporary that I have on my list. This follows a bisexual girl who must compete on a Bachelor-esque show for one of her exes, and she makes a pact with another girl on the show to take down their ex, only to begin to fall for this girl. So sounds like a fun YA, queer YA contemporary, and it comes out on September 8th. And then we have The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mix. This follows a blood witch with plans to assassinate her fiance, who's a prince, only to fall in love with his sister, and they have to stop this witch-killing plague. So fun fantasy situation. It's Rebecca's debut, and it comes out sometime in October. I don't believe it has an official release date yet. And then another Agent Siblings release. This is Kylie Lee Baker's The Empress of Time. This is the sequel to her debut, The Keeper of the Night, which was another one of my favorite books of 2021. This is the second book, the finale of that duology. Keeper of the Night follows a half-British Soul Reaper, half-Japanese Shinigami who flees from London to Japan to serve the goddess of death and is given impossible tasks to find and kill 3 yokai, or Japanese demons, and it's just a highly fun, action-packed adventure, and also ends on a horrible cliffhanger, so I'm just so ready for Empress of Time, which comes out also sometime in October. And then these last 3, I don't believe have any amount of release dates. They come out sometime in the fall next year. The first one is another graphic novel. This is The Marble Queen by Anna Kopp, which is a fantasy graphic novel about a sapphic political arranged marriage, which sounds really interesting. And then next on the list is How to Succeed in Witchcraft by Aislinn Brophy. This is a contemporary fantasy debut following a biracial witch who must perform as the lead in her school play in order to earn a scholarship to a magical school, which that just sounds like a lot of fun. And then finally, The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew, another contemporary fantasy debut. This one set in college, follows an own voices deaf main character who must learn to control her ability to cross between worlds. So there you go. Those were all of my most anticipated YA releases of 2022. I am so excited for all of them, and I just cannot wait. I think I'm gonna have a really great reading year next year. So please let me know in the comments if any of those books also speak to you, if they're on your most anticipated releases list, or if you are inspired to buy any of them because of this video. That'd be cool. If there's any books on your most anticipated YA list that were not on my list, I would love to know. Leave those down below as well. And don't forget to check out the links in my description to causes that need your support. I always have those, so you can check out and give a little if you have the time, money, or energy to do so. And I think that's all. So I look forward to chatting with y'all in the comments.